My son gave my doctor a falsified incapacity report that said I can't handle my own affairs. I have until 5 p.m. today to get a second medical opinion. I just called another doctor and booked the earliest appointment available. The living room held the usual stillness, threadbare carpet under my feet, the clock ticking on the mantelpiece, and sunlight sliding weakly through the curtains. Mark sat across from me, his grip on a legal file firm. It was thicker than I expected. I recognized the heading immediately: Incapacity Declaration, dated May 5th, 2024. The paper carried signatures and seals. This was his weapon. He leaned forward. Mum, signing this today stops everything from moving forward. I want to help. You know it's for your own good. I adjusted my glasses, fingertips tracing the arms worn smooth from years of use. My frail posture made the words "own good" feel like iron gloves squeezing my lungs. I didn't look at him. I'm not signing. His expression tightened, eyes narrowing. He opened the file wider, sliding it toward me, the soft thud sharp in the silence. The doctor believes you can't manage finances or health decisions. If you refuse, I file for guardianship in 10 days. Then it's court. I studied his face. The man I called my son was a stranger sitting in my grandmother's old chair. The place still smelled faintly of lavender polish my mother used decades ago, but nothing here was familiar anymore. You're not considering my approval, I said. This document isn't proper. The doctor never examined me. I have the records here, the hospital notes. You won't get a better opinion before the deadline. This is the truth. I felt the tremor in my hands and steadied them on my lap. The room's air felt thick, but I forced myself quiet. Mark shifted impatiently. His phone chimed briefly. He glanced, then set it back. Mum, you need to think of the risks. Not signing means delays, court battles, stress. Mark. No answer. Just a tight silence, and his gaze fixed on my calm refusal. It was 15 minutes in, and I remained motionless. No nod, no shake, no words. Just the steady tapping of the clock's second hand and the faint hum of the heater. He blinked, unease flickering for the first time. The control he wielded in this room slipped slightly. His jaw clenched. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I lowered my head. After all these years, the brutal truth was that he wanted me out of the way. Then I spoke, quiet but definite. I'll get a second opinion. Medical, legal, whatever it takes. I'll prove that incapacity is a lie. Mark's lips tightened, and silence reclaimed the room. The timer had started. 10 days until petition. 36 hours until my appointment. The stakes, my autonomy, my home, locked tight in a battle of wills I'd fought silently for too long. I leaned back in my chair. My frail fingers curled around the worn armrests. My grey hair settled messily against my neck. I was tired, but I wasn't done yet. The clock read 10:45 a.m. as I slouched into the cramped office, the leather chair wearing me down through its unforgiving firmness. The thin carpet muffled the scrape of my worn shoes. The morning's subway ride had left my legs stiff and shoulders aching. Twice I nearly lost balance exiting the train. The taxi from the station cost $23, a steep bill, but worth the time saved. Time that wasn't mine to waste. I appreciate you fitting me in, I said, adjusting my glasses, which always slid down the bridge of my nose. My grey hair was pinned at the back, strands loose against my pale temples. Gabriel, the lawyer, smiled, but his eyes betrayed urgency beneath his calm tone. We're on a tight schedule, he said, tapping the folder labelled Dylan v. Emery, case 45321. Mark Dillon has already filed preliminary papers suggesting your incapacity. If the guardianship petition goes through next week, you lose control over your finances and residence? I inhaled sharply and steadied my hands on the desk. You mentioned a trust arrangement. Yes, Gabriel replied, unfolding a printed form. A trust with the right to reside clause. You remain in your home, control essential decisions, but it requires filing before the court date. That means the affidavit and all identification by day 5. I counted silently. That's 3 days from today. Gabriel flipped a page. The problem? This kind of trust is rare here. It involves a special trust code, 9TR, filed via the Eastwood Registry. He paused. And the bank requires notarized documentation, then a dual verification process. I felt a wave of fatigue, pressing my palms into my knees to fight the urge to fold forward. Suddenly, Gabriel's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, blood draining from his face. It's Dylan's office. They're pushing for an emergency review. He's claiming I'm withholding evidence. I straightened, forcing my voice firm. What does that mean for us? It means your filing window might close sooner if the court grants a motion, and it reduces my available time for document preparation. He rubbed his temples. I'll have to coordinate carefully. A sharp ping came again. Gabriel silenced the call. I should tell you. My availability is limited tomorrow. I'll be at a conference, unreachable from 1 to 6 p.m. I listened as the weight of bureaucracy settled on my shoulders. Then, everything must move faster. He nodded. Here's a twist no one expects. I recommend you give the original trust documents to Mrs. Carlson next door. She's kept a low profile, but she's reliable. A retired clerk with ties at the county registry office. Handling the originals is risky. Mark might intercept if left at my firm. I blinked, surprised. I'd barely spoken to Mrs. Carlson beyond polite hallway greetings. Gabriel handed me a sealed envelope. Prepare copies, keep one set, give the others to Mrs. Carlson. It's your best chance to avoid losing critical papers. Outside, a sudden gust rattled the building windows. I felt a shiver despite the warm room. I folded the papers slowly, steadying my breath, my frailty a stubborn opponent. When I exited, the sunlight was sharper. I paused and dialed Mrs. Carlson's number, my hands trembling. It was time to enlist unexpected allies. Later, sitting at my cluttered kitchen table, I laid out trust paperwork and duplicated the documents. Each signature was a deliberate step toward reclaiming the life Mark aimed to steal. The shaking in my fingers reminded me the fight wasn't just legal. It was a battle against time and my own limitations. Tomorrow, I'd face exhaustion again. But for now, the papers were ready. And Mrs. Carlson would hold my future in her hands. The linoleum floors at Dr. Bennett's clinic creaked under my worn slippers as I settled into the stiff plastic chair. Alone, save for the flickering fluorescent lights overhead and the distant murmur of voices behind the front desk. The clock on the wall read 11:37 a.m., day 3 of 10, until Mark filed his guardianship petition. 3 days in, and already the weight in my joints felt heavier than yesterday. The receptionist, a woman with a wary glance and tight smile, handed me a clipboard. I rested my glasses on the bridge of my nose and adjusted my frail posture before filling out the forms. Every detail felt like a confession. My age, medication, subtle tremor in my left hand. Mark's attempt to have me declared incapacitated burned in the back of my mind like a low-grade fever. When Dr. Bennett finally appeared, a middle-aged man with a skeptical frown, I noted the crease between his eyebrows. So, you're here for a second opinion? You understand the stakes? His voice was soft, but firm, measuring. I nodded slowly. I'm here to prove my capacity as of May 9th, 2024. A complete evaluation. I slid the folder across the desk, documents stamped with date and case identifiers, including the second evaluation I had secured after a grueling review of my medical history. He flipped through the papers, pausing on notes that contradicted what Mark's doctor had provided. "Your son called here earlier," the receptionist interrupted, her voice low enough for only me to hear as she approached. "He asked questions, probing about your visits, your condition. I told him we couldn't share anything without your consent." Dr. Bennett's eyes flicked up at her. "That is standard procedure. Patient confidentiality is paramount." Straightening his white coat, he added, "It's unusual for a family member to intervene this way, but—" He hesitated, a flicker of suspicion hidden behind his professional calm. "Why such a rush? Are you under pressure to produce this certificate?" I tightened my lips, acknowledging the truth without words. "Yes, 10 days. Petition pending." My fingers brushed against the edge of my folder as I fought the fatigue creeping up my arms and the dull ache in my knees. He leaned back. "I'll run tests, full cognitive and physical. But be aware, no evaluation is infallible." His gaze locked with mine. Motivation matters when interpreting results. Hours later, after tests measured memory recall, motor functions, and decision-making skills, the nurse printed the official certificate. May 9th, 2024. Full capacity declared. Patient subject is cognitively sound and able to manage personal affairs. I held the paper like a lifeline, the words concrete and sharp. Before I could digest the moment, the receptionist returned. I spoke to Mark again. He said if we release any documents, he'll escalate through his lawyer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "But we're keeping everything confidential. He won't get a copy without you." The clinic's stance caught me off guard. Behind the clinical walls, where control usually slipped away, I had secured a fortress. The papers in my hand were more than proof. They were resistance. Relieved though I was, exhaustion hit me hard. My legs trembled when I stood. I gripped the armrest of the chair, fighting to steady myself. "I'll be back for the hearing document," I muttered, pocketing the certificate. The receptionist gave a small, approving nod. Outside, the spring air tasted sharp in my lungs as I wheeled slowly toward the bus stop. 10 days left. Every breath measured against Mark's legal moves. The second opinion was secured, but the battle was far from over. Tick, tick, tick. The kitchen clock ticked 15:37 as I settled at the table by the window. The sunlight was weak early autumn, casting a pale yellow over the chipped formica surface. My fingers trembled slightly as I organized the documents: trust papers, medical evaluations, and a notarized letter from Gabriel. I had one clear task today: get these papers out of my house and into safe hands. Mrs. Carlson lived 2 houses down at 12 Rosewood Lane. She had agreed to hold the originals for me until the court date. I couldn't afford to lose anything. Mark was already trying to claim control, wielding an incomplete power of attorney form that hadn't been signed properly. The court could see through that stunt, but every hour before the hearing tightened the noose. My legs ached when I stood. Knees creaked. Breath was short. I used the cane by the door for the few slow steps to the porch. I carried the slim manila envelope in my jacket pocket, close to my chest. I left the sliding door unlocked. Mrs. Carlson always came by around 16. There was a pattern interrupt that unsettled the quiet afternoon. Mark was parked near Mrs. Carlson's front yard in a silver sedan, brand unfamiliar to me. I saw him approach the porch, a folder tucked under his arm. His natural ease was a mask. He spoke softly to Mrs. Carlson through the screen door. I watched from my window as her hands clenched the doorframe, and then she shook her head. He pulled out his phone, fingers tapping quickly. Mark's voice rose to polite insistence, insisting he needed access to check on Mrs. Carlson's well-being. She didn't budge. The neighbour's refusal was a quiet stand against him, but I felt the surge of worry. If Mark was watching her, waiting for a chance, the next move might come soon. The documents could be at risk if he found another way inside. I opened one of the small drawers in the corner, pulling out a folded paper. It was a handwritten note from her. "You're safe here, Eleanor. I'll keep an eye out. Do not trust him to speak for you." The trust in those words was a fragile anchor in the sea of doubt. I called Gabriel once more. "She's holding firm," I told him, voice steady. "Mark was here within the hour. She wouldn't let him in." He replied, "Good, but he's escalating. Watch your phone, and no more trips outside without someone with you." I sank back to the chair, aware of the widening knot in my chest. The tension wasn't just fear of the court ruling, it was the isolation, the mental weight of strategizing while my body betrayed me. Mark's watching neighbour wasn't just a nuisance, it was a message. I lifted the envelope once again, fingers tracing the edges. The papers inside would decide my future. Between legal filings and Mark's attempts to seize my autonomy, the hours crawled. The benign kitchen suddenly felt like the edge of a battlefield. Every tick of the clock grew louder. The doorbell rang. 6 sharp knocks. But it wasn't the neighbour. Mark. He stood there, not breaking character, but I saw the tightening in his jaw. The trap had been sprung. The documents were safe, but the fight was far from over. The county clerk's office smelled of old paper and lost time. The metal chairs dug into my back as I leaned forward, clutching the folded trust documents. My glasses slid down my nose. I pushed them back up with trembling fingers. Gabriel sat across from me, his face folded in a crease of concern. His suit jacket was neat, but his hand didn't stop tapping the folder on the desk. "May 6th, 2024, timestamp 1443, registration confirmed," Gabriel said, rubbing his chin. "But the registrar just warned delays are possible. Staffing is down, and they're swamped with filings." His voice was low, clipped. "Can't guarantee the paperwork clears before your son's petition files in 5 days." I pressed my lips together, feeling the weight of time and my own frailty settling around me like a coat too heavy on my shoulders. My grey hair was pulled back, but loose strands curled near my temples, damp with sweat. I sniffed. The clock on the wall ticked loud in the silence. The door creaked. Mark Dillon stepped in unannounced, eyes locked on Gabriel. His presence made my heart hitch despite the ache in my ribs. "Gabriel?" Mark said, voice steady but cold. "Your client's efforts are delaying inevitable proceedings. We have the power of attorney forms ready. I'll file the guardianship petition early if necessary. You're advised to reconsider." He flipped open a legal folder with official-looking documents, sliding a sheet toward the table. It bore my name, bold on top, with incapacity declaration stamped in red. Gabriel's eyes didn't flicker. "I'm aware, Mark, but Eleanor is legally competent. We have certified medical evaluations to counter that claim." He tapped my shaking hand for reassurance. It was a small touch, but strong. Mark's jaw tightened. "Courts favor prompt resolutions. We can expedite filings." His gaze pierced mine. "You're exhausting yourself fighting a losing battle." The exhaustion was a living thing inside me. My hands trembled, the fine lines on my face deepening. It felt like cold water poured into brittle glass, but I straightened my fragile posture and met his stare. "No one's winning if they take my home," Gabriel leaned forward. I'll file an opposition affidavit immediately. We're not conceding. Mark glanced at his phone, then at Gabriel. The court clerk told me they're short-staffed too. Delays might backfire. His eyes flicked to me, victorious. Maybe you're not as far ahead as you think. The session doubled back on itself. Each exchange was a step through barbed wire. Outside, the lobby's fluorescent light buzzed with mechanical indifference. I sat still, breathing shallow, senses sharp, despite the exhaustion clawing through me. Gabriel stood, gathering the folder. I'll make sure the county registrar sends us a receipt with a secure timestamp. We'll trace any delays. He offered me a slight nod, protective. Mark smirked as he turned to leave. 5 days, Eleanor. I watched the door close behind him, the echo hollow. Day 5 of 10 until the final petition? Gabriel muttered. The clock's ticking. The registrar's warning repeated in my head. Staffing shortages, slow processing, competing legal forces. The trust was technically filed, but bureaucracy might stall its protection. I gripped my cardigan, knuckles white, grey strands sticking damp to my temple skin. I had the paperwork in, but the threat grew. Like a wall closing in, layered and slow, forged from forms and phone calls and readiness to use every legal weapon Mark had. The fight was no longer just against him, but the system itself. The air felt thick as we left the office. I sagged against the worn armrest of my wheelchair in the car. All I could do now was hope the system worked faster than my son's impatience. 5 days until everything could change. The clock on Mrs. Carlson's living room wall read 13:42. I leaned forward on the worn armrest of her faded armchair, glasses perched low on my nose, fingers trembling as I thumbed the edges of the packet she'd kept safe. Originals of my trust papers, medical letters, and my last wishes. Mrs. Carlson sat across, hands folded, eyes alert. Mark stopped by yesterday, she said softly. Asked about your papers. A few times. He says he needs access for verification. Her voice carried a weight I didn't need to hear, but had to. The walls here were thin. I felt the neighbours' unease through them like a low pulse. You told him no? I asked, steady despite the pounding in my temples. Yes, twice. He didn't look happy. Her gaze flicked to the window. Outside, the street seemed unusually quiet for 2 p.m. A man in a casual shirt stood by the curb, head bent toward his phone. Mark. He's watching too closely, Mrs. Carlson said, lowering her voice. Last night, my doorbell rang twice. No one there. I nodded. Increased fear was part of this now, not sudden, yet it eased no less. Mark's moves were overt. Today, he'd taken a new step, calling the local police, alleging harassment, probably thinking authority on his side could push Mrs. Carlson or me to back down. The shift was clear when 2 officers arrived at her door 50 minutes ago. She said they asked Mark's accuser, or rather, listened to her side with a cursory nod. Then they left, dismissing the claims straightforwardly. No reports filed. Mark's leverage crumbled quietly. I took the folded letter Mrs. Carlson pressed into my hand. This is from the police. No action. Insufficient evidence of harassment. To my relief, I said, though the ache in my ribs reminded me how fragile relief was. I rubbed my temples, feeling the frail skin where grey hair escaped the neat pins. My legs ached from sitting so long, but movement was slow with the stiffness creeping in. I'll stay here tonight, I decided aloud. If Mark's watching, I want to be where my documents are. Mrs. Carlson pulled a thermos from her kitchen table and poured tea. Its warmth seeped through the thin cup and into my hands, calming the tremor. The clock ticked with deliberate rhythm. 13:58. 4 days remained until Mark would file his guardianship petition. Suddenly, my phone vibrated sharply on the small side table. A news alert about increased local vigilante complaints tied to an influx of police-citizen disputes, the timing too close to Mark's actions to be coincidental. I looked to the window. Mark was gone, disappearing down the block with an angry scowl. A knock came at the door. Mrs. Carlson froze. I pushed myself up slowly. "Who is it?" I called. No answer. But footsteps receded. I met her eyes. "He's testing us." The weight of exposure pressed down. Mark had shown his hand, using proxies in police and neighbours, hoping to isolate me. But neighbours' testimony was solid. The documents were untouched. His intimidation failed. For now. I fingered the legal forms again. Neither my frailty nor his threats would move me from this. The days ahead loomed long and cold. But today, the line Mark tried to cross held firm. The walls of Dr. Bennett's clinic were cooler than I remembered, and the linoleum floor creaked faintly beneath my worn slippers. My hands trembled slightly as I clutched my cane, its familiar grip rough against my skin. The clock on the wall read 11:23 a.m. I settled into the vinyl chair across from Dr. Bennett, the same one where I had sat 4 days ago. "Dr. Bennett," I said, steady despite the shaking in my limbs. "Did Mark Dillon contact you again?" He hesitated, thumbs tapping a worn medical chart. "Yes, twice yesterday afternoon." His voice was measured, but tight. "He tried to have me retract the second opinion. He said you weren't competent to manage your affairs. Asked if I would withdraw the certificate. You refused." My voice dropped into a whisper, fragile and urgent. "I did." He met my gaze. "I keep the second opinion sealed, protected from interference." The revelation hit like a cold wave. Mark's legal push was more aggressive than I'd expected. His calls had been frantic, relentless. "Do you have the call logs?" Dr. Bennett nodded, sliding a file across the desk. The timestamps showed a sharp spike in attempts. 4 calls within an hour, 2 at 3:12 p.m. and 3:47 p.m. His finger traced the entries. "He's desperate. You're not just fighting for autonomy, he's scrambling to retain control." A dry silence settled between us. The weight of 10 days, still ticking away, pressed harder. This was day 7. I rubbed my glasses, the metal arms cool against the warmth of my temples. My voice was calm, but firm. "Mark's pressure confirms my legal advantage. I need to ensure this second opinion stays intact." Dr. Bennett tapped a pen on the edge of the desk. "You should know. My team doubled down on support. We've routed the opinion through a secure health portal. The record is time-stamped and locked." That was a small fortress against his influence. Yet, Mark's access to the family doctor and attempts at power of attorney hadn't stopped. I felt a flicker of shock. He's doubled his legal moves. If he gains access to my physician's notes, then everything falls apart. Bennett's eyes narrowed. I stood, cane steady beneath me. "Thank you, Doctor. This means the court may see through his tactics." Before leaving, Bennett added quietly, "Mark's desperation is your exposure. It signals how close you are, but it also means he will try again." My pulse quickened, a renewed urgency settling across my frail frame. The tremors in my hands felt heavier. Outside, the clinic's parking lot buzzed faintly with afternoon traffic. The air smelled of rain, damp and fresh. I pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. With every frantic call Mark made, he left a trail, a signal of panic and overreach. My legal counsel, Gabriel, would find leverage in this disclosure. Pattern interrupt. From the clinic hallway, A nurse approached, her face tight with concern. Dr. Bennett wanted me to give you this. She handed me a medical packet stamped confidential. Inside, among the routine notes, I found a sealed addendum from a neuropsychologist on staff, dated yesterday, confirming full cognitive capacity, unsolicited by me. Dr. Bennett had secured this quietly, a silent ally's move. This unexpected declaration shifted the battle. I paused, reading again. The clinic was ready to testify in my favor. Mark's influence was blocked outright. Outside the clinic, I glanced at my phone. 5 missed calls, all from Mark. His controlled demeanor cracked in those desperate moments, revealing the vulnerability beneath his legal mask. Day 7 of 10. My home, my autonomy, and my future remained on the line. But today, I gained ground and a concrete shield. The fight was far from over. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as I settled into the squeaky metal chair at the county records office. The clock on the wall read 11:23 a.m. 8 days left before Mark filed his petition for guardianship. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the stack of documents I'd photocopied earlier. Mortgage records, liens, and property assessments tied to my house. I needed facts, solid proof of what Mark had been hiding. The man had slipped a loan secured by my property. But where? The county records were a labyrinth. I pulled out my glasses and adjusted them on my nose, squinting at a sheet dense with numbers, dates, and cryptic codes. Loan number 832-1945, the header suggested. There were 3 liens I hadn't known about. The last one was dated nearly 6 months back, exactly the time Mark's behavior shifted. The mortgage showed Mark had secured a loan against the house, valued at $320,000. I ran a finger down the column labeled Balance Due. It was marked $264,035 as of last month, but a note caught my attention. Acceleration clause triggered, pending bank approval. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of it in my chest. Mark was trying to force the bank to accelerate withdrawal to get at the money before I could respond. I pressed my fingers to my temples, a dull ache building at the corners of my eyes. Mental fatigue was settling in like slow-moving fog. I caught my reflection in the glass partition, grey hair pulled back tightly, wrinkles deepening with every frown, brittle hands clutching paperwork. An older clerk approached when she noticed me staring. "You look like you could use some help," she said quietly. I nodded, handed over the documents. As she scrolled through the system, I asked, "Is there any indication this acceleration has gone through?" "Bank flagged it yesterday. Processing delay," she replied, her voice low. "Looks like they paused the release for review." I leaned back, surprised. The delay was unintentional but crucial. It bought me time. A pattern interrupt shattered the stall. My phone buzzed. The caller ID read Mark Dillon. I hesitated, but answered. "Eleanor, you're wasting time," he said, voice clipped. "I have power of attorney forms ready. Once signed, all this," he gestured vaguely, "ends." "I'm not signing anything," I replied firmly. "Not until the court hears all facts." He laughed, cold. "You're already a step behind." Then he hung up. I closed my eyes. The mental strain throbbed stronger. The last night's poor sleep gnawed at me. My vision blurred slightly under the weight of numbers and codes. The clerk handed me a printout. "Here. This recent loan filing shows his debt, but the bank's delay means he can't execute it immediately. You might want to show this to your lawyer." I folded the page carefully, my fingers brushing the worn edges of the table. Mark's financial vulnerability, a chink in his armor. For all his legal maneuvers, he depended on that loan. If I could expose it in court, leverage would shift. I stood slowly, leaning heavily on my cane. Even simple movements took effort now. 10 days to stop Mark. 8 days passed. 2 remain. Outside, the county clerk's office buzzed with ordinary lives unaware of this quiet war over a fragile woman's autonomy. I had to hold on through the mental fog, the tremors, and the pressure. Because losing this fight meant losing my home, losing control, losing myself. The clock on the living room wall read 18:04 as I settled into the worn armchair beside the window, my trembling hands folded over my cane. Wrinkles deepened when I adjusted my glasses, glancing at the circle of faces arranged like jury members in the room. Mark stood near the doorway, arms crossed, brows tight. "We don't have time to waste. This petition is the only way to protect you," he said sharply, eyes fixed on me. I exhaled slowly. "I have proof Mark's report is falsified," I said, voice even. "This video shows everything." I held up a small black flash drive. Gabriel stepped forward, clicking to the front of the group. "Everyone needs to hear this before passing judgment," he said quietly. I pressed play on the speaker linked to the TV. The footage showed the last family meeting, Mark manipulating the family doctor over the phone, insisting I be declared incapable. The voice wasn't just firm, it was threatening. Mark's tone crackled with urgency and control. Faces shifted uneasily. My son's jaw clenched, his confident posture faltered with each frame. My eldest daughter's eyes widened. Someone whispered, "Why would he do that?" Mark's face registered alarm. "That's edited. You can't trust the source." His voice lost its sharp edge. His facade crumbled beneath the steady gaze of our cousins and siblings. My daughter stood, voice shaking but loud enough to fill the space. "Is this why Dad didn't want you involved? Because you'd cheat to take everything?" The dead air was heavy. "You're not protecting Mom. You're protecting yourself." I felt a wave of exhaustion press down, but I sat straighter. My breathing was uneven. The damage to my family was visible, fractures running deep, dividing old ties. But today, some leaned my way. Mrs. Carlson adjusted her glasses, nodding slowly. She passed me a cup of tea from the side table. "You're not alone, Eleanor." Her words were small, but solid. Mark's phone vibrated. He glanced briefly, eyes flickering with frustration. "You want to see urgency? I have the court's date in 10 days. You're out of options." Gabriel raised a hand. "We're preparing a counter-petition. The independence claim lacks merit." Mark snapped. "You think you can stall justice?" His voice cracked. His emotion was raw, exposed like a wound. I'd never seen him like this. Suddenly, my granddaughter burst into tears, hugging my arm. "Grandma, don't let him take your home." Her small hand trembled as it clung to me. The room held its breath as Mark sank into the chair, defeated not by law, but by the family's shifting weight. The recording connected more than facts. It unraveled his authority. Then the phone rang. A sudden blast of static noise from the hallway. Someone outside had called and spoke loudly enough for the room to hear a leaked audio revealing Mark's private threats. A public disaster was unfolding beyond these walls while we argued inside. The timer clicked louder in my mind. The fight wasn't just legal anymore. It was personal, public, and relentless. I gripped the armrest tighter, hearing voices turn in my favor. They now questioned not my capacity, but his motives. This was the new battlefield. The timer on my phone glowed 3:58 p.m. as I propped my cane against the clipboard. The county clerk's office smelled of old paper and stale coffee. My fingers trembled as I adjusted my glasses and approached the counter. The clerk, A woman, perhaps 35, with sharp eyes, tapped her screen once more. Her fingers were quick, efficient. "You have until 5 o'clock, ma'am," she said, voice clipped. "It's been busy all afternoon. This is your last chance." I nodded, steadying my breath. Each step across the linoleum had sent a sharp sting through my knees, sending a tremor through my frail body that I briefly fought to control. The chair in the waiting area had helped regain some strength, but the strain was visible now on my pale skin. My lawyer, Gabriel, prepared the second medical opinion and trust paperwork. "They're ready to file," I said, voice calm and firm. "Bring them here." She slid the folder across the counter, revealing a stamped document. May 10th, 2024, 4:37 p.m. The ink was fresh. I exhaled a little. "Thank you." I signed with a shaky hand, the pen heavy, as though it weighed down my resolve. A sharp ring interrupted the quiet. The clerk's desk phone blinked red. She glanced, then answered. "Clerk's office," she said, voice neutral. The man's voice was flat, but tense. "This is Mark Dillon, petitioning for guardianship on Eleanor Emery. I'm calling to contest the timing of this filing." I felt the weight shift in my chest. That voice. Mark's cold impatience. The chair creaked as I gripped the armrest, attempting to steady the surge of pain in my back. "What's the issue, Mr. Dillon?" The clerk replied, voice unyielding. "I have reason to believe these documents were submitted after the deadline." I watched, breath shallow, as the clerk scanned her system again. Then she turned, looking directly at me. "Mr. Dillon, the papers bearing your mother's second medical opinion and trust resolution were stamped at 4:37 p.m. That's within the deadline, documented precisely in our filing system." Her voice left no room for argument. My cane slipped from my grip, falling softly to the floor. A sudden prick behind my left knee forced me to shift weight sharply onto my cane again. I swallowed past the pain. The clerk added, "We record exact times electronically. The court will proceed accordingly." In that small, cool room, with faded yellow walls and cracking tile, the invisible cameras in corners seemed suddenly omnipresent, much like the watch Mark kept over every move I made. My hands shook as I pulled the folder close. The physical exhaustion seeped through every bone, but I felt the fragile armor of legal defense click securely in place. The delivery had come in just in time. My body protested, but my will hadn't broken. I heard the door open behind me, low footsteps approaching, not mine. Without looking, I knew it was Gabriel, arriving with more counsel. Outside, the clock's sharp ticks carried heavy meaning. The final hours before Mark filed his petition would pass, now tethered to these stamped papers living proof of my capacity. I pocketed the stamped paperwork, hearing again Mark's voice through the clerk's phone, futile, defeated. Minutes later I sat back, frail but resolute. The legal defense was solidified before the deadline. The battle had shifted, but not ended. The clock flipped to 4:59 p.m. The deadline ticked down, but this round belonged to me. The clock on the kitchen wall was stuck at 14:19 when the phone buzzed for the 10th time that morning. I glanced at it, then ignored the caller ID, Mark Dillon. My fingers trembled slightly as I set it face down on the worn armrest of my chair. No answer. No reply to texts. They'd been blocked since last week. Dillon family 1. MD Emery, both banned from my number. I counted the missed calls between sips of lukewarm tea. 10, 15, 20. His voice messages started with a calm tone, a steady attempt at reason, then shifted to sharp, clipped words. "Mother, you don't understand what's at stake," his last message said, leaving the line cold, no emotion, no pause. Threats had crept in between those lines, quiet, insidious. A lawyer's letter slid under my door yesterday, citing attempts to establish power of attorney, questioning my capacity. That letter weighed heavier on me than any physical pain. My frail hands traced the edges of the documents spread across my lap. Medical reports from Dr. Bennett, confirming my mental clarity. Sworn affidavits from Gabriel, my lawyer, ready to file counter evidence. I adjusted my glasses, the thin wire frame pressing lightly against the bridge of my nose. Tremors made the papers shift on my knees, but my mind stayed sharp, calculating. Each day beyond the 10-day court petition deadline is a battle. Mark's calls are a storm. I weather silently, the emotional toll threading through my bones more than any stiffness or ache. I feel it. Pressure, like a slow squeeze. The creak of the front gate startled me. Mrs. Carlson was on my doorstep before I could call down a warning. Her eyes, sharp beneath her silver hair, scanned the street as though guarding our small block. Quiet but firm, she stepped inside, leaving a thermos of tea on the table. "He won't stop," she said, with no introduction. "I've told him to back off." The sound of her voice, steady and deliberate, broke the tension lodged in my chest. I looked at her with tired eyes. "He's filing again." Mrs. Carlson's hands unfolded a letter she had taken from my mailbox earlier. I spoke to Gabriel. "You don't have to handle this alone." Outside, I heard a car door slam. The street was still. 45 minutes later, the buzzing relented. No calls, no messages. The pattern shifted suddenly. Late afternoon, a knock. Not Mark's, but firm, official. 2 plainclothes detectives showed a warrant. A new threat. Someone had flagged a concern about unauthorized persons around my home. Mark's impatience had exposed him. The court barred him from contact pending investigation. Mrs. Carlson's nod was resolute. "You're safe. For now." The sunlight faded over the peeling porch paint as the door closed behind the officers. Alone again, the silence wrapped around me with its own weight. But in every locked drawer, in every sealed folder, in every message blocked, I hold an invisible line. I will protect what's mine, even if it kills me. Tomorrow, the game continues. The bank branch smelled of polished wood and cold metal. I sat in the back corner of the waiting area, glasses balanced on the bridge of my nose, cane resting against the faded fabric of the chair. My hands trembled slightly as I flipped through the papers Gabriel had compiled. Property deeds, court correspondence, Mark's financial disclosures intercepted through careful inquiry. "Ms. Emery?" The clerk's voice was tight, professional. I nodded, standing slowly. Aching joints reminded me of years in each deliberate movement. The woman gestured toward the narrow meeting room with its blunt lighting and scratched table. "Your son has some unsettled matters," she started, eyes flicking toward a screen only she could see. Mark Dillon's credit report was flagged last month. Loan default on account 482-933-029. The house collateral is gone, auctioned off after the foreclosure. I waited, steady breath measured. "Can you confirm the date?" "October 15th, posted in the records last week. Delinquency triggered. He had 60 days to cover before repossession." A pause, her posture shifting. "I'm limited on details here. Bank policy." "I understand." I adjusted the thin cardigan, the sleeves loose on my frail arms. "Has Mark made any recent loan applications?" She glanced at the screen again. "Yes, but none approved. Credit risk flagged." A data printout slid between us. Numbers and codes, dry as a court transcript. Yet it confirmed the unraveling, Mark's instability, financial and legal. "He's been forced into therapy by the creditor," she added quietly. "Just started 2 weeks ago. Account of loan default terms. It's in the compliance file, part of the behavioral conditions. The data printout indicated therapy sessions logged under coded schedule. TS 0027B, dates marked. The bank's lender was using this as leverage, documented in legal filings as a sign of instability. I shifted in my seat, the mounting pressure tightening my chest. Mark entering therapy would be spun as proof of erratic behavior in court. A weapon aimed at me. The clerk's expression softened as I stood, the cane clicking quietly against linoleum. I'm sorry we can't provide more. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows. My fingers clutched the papers tighter. The past weeks of strain, the falsified medical report, the looming guardianship, had worn thin my resolve. Anxiety chiseled deeper lines in my face. Pattern interrupt. My phone vibrated sharply. The screen flashed. Gabriel. I swiped, voice faint but urgent. Eleanor, there's a new filing drop. Mark's notifying the court of a therapist's affidavit linked to his financial collapse. This could shift the custody claims. I inhaled, nodding even though he couldn't see me. Thank you. I'll prepare a response immediately. The bank's glass doors echoed footsteps as I stood unsteadily, cane tapping the floor. The revelation sank. Mark's pressures would ease only once his finances crumbled entirely, loss of collateral dismantling his leverage. Yet every step forward risked exposure of my own vulnerabilities. This trace of his damaged credit profile was a foothold, but the cost was heavier anxiety gnawing at my frail frame. The quiet battle for my home and autonomy was sharpened by his own collapse, his power waning even as the court clock ticked relentlessly down. 10 days left. The next moves would decide if I remained in control or became another lost file in the system. The clock on the front porch pillar read 10:17 a.m., its plastic casing chipped near the 9. I clutched my cane tighter, the tremor in my left hand sharp as I leaned on the faded wooden railing. Every step outside was a strain, but the crisp spring air was a rare boon. Weeks had blurred since filing the trust, but time remained merciless. 10 days until Mark's petition would reach the judge's desk. I heard the crunch of tires on gravel before seeing him. Mark, unannounced, standing on my grandmother's porch, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. His eyes flicked to the no trespassing sticker I had finally managed to affix beneath the peeling paint. The warning with local police report 21-94B remained a silent threat behind my back. I straightened my cardigan, shoulders stiff from lack of use. Mark, I said, voice even but firm. You know the conditions here. I won't allow contact outside scheduled discussions. The weight in my chest pressed harder, a familiar mix of exhaustion and something darker. His gaze hardened. Eleanor, this is my house too. You're making a mistake. A flicker of calculation showed. He didn't want a scene. Not here. Not in Mrs. Carlson's line of sight. I felt the strain in my legs sharpen, a cold ache radiating from my knees. Each breath was measured, slow. I adjusted my glasses, smoothing the thin wire frame against my nose. My legal autonomy stands for now, Mark. That trust we filed, it's valid. He stepped closer, enough to trigger the years-old instinct to recoil, but I held firm. I'll file the petition in 10 days, whether you like it or not. The firmness in his voice was met with the resolve in mine. If you breach the order, the police report and your own signature on the warnings will be used. My eyes didn't waver, despite the shaking warmth at the edges. He paused, a heartbeat longer than necessary. This isn't over. He turned abruptly and walked down the steps, the soft thud of his worn shoes on wood punctuating his exit. I closed the porch door, fingers stiff on the knob. The coolness of the wood was grounding. I let the door latch click with a firmness that echoed deeper than sound, the physical discomfort in my knees forgotten for a moment. A sudden ring pierced the quiet. My phone's screen lit up, Mark's name flashing. I stayed rooted. He called my therapist's number, Dr. Kaplan's office, likely spinning narratives, seeking to sway professional opinion. The incoming call was a slap of reality. This was a new front in his campaign to strip control piece by piece. I sank slowly into the porch swing, letting the frail throb in my legs remind me of my limits. But something inside steadied. The warning filings, the trust, Mrs. Carlson's watchful eyes, these were the walls I raised. Mark's reluctance to create public chaos had kept his distance today. He knew disruption would only undermine him now. The eviction notice slipped under his door last week, the final domino. Credit collapsed after missed payments. His property manager's letter was final. It was a twist neither of us expected. He needed help. Therapy mandated before anything else. His legal threats would soon lose weight under that pressure. I drew my cardigan tighter around my thin arms. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small victory solidify beneath the ache. My control wasn't just legal. It was physical, emotional, real, and it was mine to keep. The grandmother's kitchen table sagged under a neat stack of papers, the yellowed edges curling like old wounds. I pushed my glasses higher on my nose and smoothed the cardigan's cuffs over trembling wrists. The clock on the wall ticked 15:37. Outside, a brittle wind rattled the awning. Gabriel's legal summary lay open beside the latest medical report from Dr. Bennett. The second opinion was unequivocal. My trust and medical certifications remained uncontested. Mark's attempts to access my records had been denied through HIPAA channels. The hospital ombuds's office upheld my privacy. My autonomy stood firm, reinforced by a functional POA lodged with the court, replacing his overreach. Mark's contact is limited to monthly supervised visits, Gabriel said, voice low. And that court order expires in 10 days, the final petition deadline, after which your home is protected from his claims, legally untouchable. I exhaled quietly. 10 days. The timer pressed against my thoughts. I pushed a stray strand of grey hair behind my ear and glanced at my worn armrests. My frailty lay in contrast with the fight racking the paperwork before me. A folded letter from Mrs. Carlson sat at the table corner. Her usual watchful phrasing enclosed a note. He's attending therapy now. Unplanned. Eviction notice on his apartment came through this morning. His control is slipping. That detail struck me sharp. Mark's veneer of control unraveling. A reversal I hadn't anticipated. My hand trembled while I counted the days in my head. 30 days since the court's original deadline passed. 30 packed with quiet vigilance. Monitoring legal updates, arranging medical support, ensuring no slips in my care. Emotional strain thickened the air despite the calm surface I maintained. Suddenly, my phone buzzed, a message from the hospital's patient advocate. The case ID referenced a new notice denying any transfer of my health records without my direct consent. Mark's legal counsel had pushed again. I tapped the message, feeling the screen's cold smoothness. That means a new court hearing will be forced to override everything, Gabriel said, hands clasped tight. But given his financial hits, eviction threat, and therapy compliance, he's in a defensive crouch. Their forced compliance revealed cracks. Mark's grip was faltering. The legal fortress holding me safe so far was built precisely on exposing his weakened position. The balance tipped in my favor. I stretched out my legs slowly under the table, stiffness reminding me of my limits. The kitchen's linoleum floor pressed faintly against my slippers. The silence was deliberate. I needed to prepare for possible escalation, not ease. My mind traced the path forward. Reinforce legal documents, keep medical certifications current, liaise with Mrs. Carlson for daily checks, confirm Gabriel's court schedules, watch Mark's compliance patterns. Every element a small wall against intrusion. I folded the petition pages neatly, fingertips grazing the worn paper, then closed the folder firmly. My home and autonomy were fully protected, at least for now. The phone buzzed again, this time a brief text from Mark. Starting outpatient therapy as required. The message was cold and clipped. His credit collapsed. His eviction forced him into distance and compliance. Legally, I was secure. Quiet filled the kitchen. I leaned back into the chair, pale skin catching the afternoon light. The legal maze navigated, the fight far from over, but the sharp edge had shifted away from me this time. I felt the weight in my bones soften. Safe, for now.